Hi there, my name is Wayne Hedlund with TL Sites. In this video tutorial, we're going to talk about how to make changes on your WordPress Avada theme on the website built with the WordPress Avada theme. And we're going to talk about, in particular, how to make textual changes. For the most part, the elements in the text that's going on the page. We're not going to discuss images because that's going to be a separate video tutorial. There are a lot of ways and options of making changes with images, and I want to make sure we talk about that exclusively. Also, if you're new to the Avada WordPress theme, I recommend that you first check out the video tutorial I've created called Avada Basic Navigation. It's going to help you understand how to navigate the back end and the live view of the Avada theme. And so with this tutorial, the assumption is that you have already observed and watched that video. All right, with no further ado, let's go ahead and dive in and talk about how to make changes, in particular textual changes to the various pages on your website. On a demonstration website, we're going to be jumping between three different pages. Right here, the About page and the Prices page, About and Prices. And let's go ahead and jump into the live view of the home page. And first of all, just kind of mention that, of course, we have our sidebar navigation over here, which has got all kinds of the ability for us to create some very unique image changes and settings for all of the various elements on our page. I'm going to go ahead and collapse that, just kind of make that less overwhelming. But the first thing to keep in mind is that for most of the time, if we're just looking at making very, very basic changes, we can do so just right in the live view right here. So just finding the section that we want to change and clicking and highlighting the text is the way we can do that. So for instance, you'll notice here when I mouse over the text, this is a particular unique design where this box actually overlaps this box, and it's kind of showing up a little strange in the live view. And of course, if we needed to, we can always jump over to the front end and get a real feel for what it's supposed to look like. But jumping over here, I could say, hey, the first lesson is not free. The third lesson is free. I have no idea. That'd be really weird, of course. And again, I can save over here and jump over to the front page if I want to and just kind of see how that looks. That said, I can see right here how it looks as well. So we should be good to go. When you make a block booking with us, your first lesson is included free. So I might say your third lesson is included free of charge, right? So I'm making some changes, very, very simple. And this is actually, can be enough of what you need to know. You don't even need to necessarily watch the rest of this if you have some basics. The other thing you can do is you can highlight text and then you can make some various changes. So if I wanted to bold this or italicize it, or even potentially change the color, I can, change one of the theme colors, for instance, green or something like that if I want to. I don't particularly like that, and I think that kind of messes up the overall look. So I'm going to come over here and just hit the history and go back to the way that it was set up initially. All right. So in fact, I went back too far, so let's just pull that right here, about right there. There we're free of charge. All right, so I've done that. I'm going to go ahead and save my work so I don't get overwhelmed. And let's continue to scroll down. Here's a little button right here. So when I mouse over this button, am I able to make changes? This particular case, it's giving me a little bit of an issue. It's not letting me. So when I can't find a way to make the changes in text like that just by mousing over, or if it's difficult, like if I want to change that phone number, like it's got that stupid button showing up, then there's a couple of things that we can do. First of all, we can just click on this little pencil icon, wherever you see the pencil icon. Now, I get a little overwhelmed sometimes with pencil icons because sometimes there can just be a lot of them. It's like, well, which one is the right one? And depending on what you're wanting to change or how your website is set up, sometimes it can be difficult to figure that out. So what I prefer to do usually, especially for beginners, is instead of clicking the pencil icon over here, I find it over here. Now, remember, when we navigate, we can click and usually we can see it'll highlight the section that is going to be changed. Remember, if you don't see something highlight, like when I click on these two sections, nothing appears. And that is because, again, sometimes we have different sections based on whether we're looking at a mobile view or the tablet view, etc. So in the mobile view, it looks a little bit different. I can click now and I can see that section. Same thing here. When I click here, I can see this second section. and this first section. But when I jump back over to this image, I cannot see those. Nothing highlights because they're hidden. All right, but I can highlight here and see this first section. So jumping over to the intro and callback, when I highlight, I can see that. When I jump over to the courses, right, I highlight and I see it. So now I can expand this and highlight each of these sections and say, what is showing up here? So I've got this column 1, that's something that's hidden. I'm going to collapse that. Column 2.5 or 2/5 right there. I can see that that's this column. I can collapse that, and then I can see this column, etc. So sometimes I'll do that, and then you can actually select the items inside that column, right? So incidentally, I should have mentioned this before. Well, how do you, if you have an item that is hiding for mobile, how do you determine that? So again, I can click on the pencil icon, and we'll jump on this pencil icon for this first header. We'll click on that pencil icon. We scroll to the very bottom. We can see this right here. This section is only showing up for large screen. If I go back out of there and I select the next icon, that's going to be mobile. We jump down. I see this is visible only for small screens or mobile or like tablets, medium screen, but it's not available for large. If I turn that on, then it's going to look a little weird. We don't want that, right? So that's how we navigate or find that information. Jumping back down to this 1/5. So if I want to make changes, I can go ahead and click on the pencil. But in this case, I can just click here and say, I want to make changes to this title. And maybe I want to make more changes than just the text. I can click on this pencil icon, which is the equivalent of doing so right here. And then I can make changes either to the text. I'll call this first pass plus and see how that looks. Okay, that looks pretty good. And maybe we're all done. But maybe I want to make some more unique changes. So you'll notice over here from a navigation point, I can scroll around and see other things. So I can see if they're, if it's going to be visible on, large screen or all of the screens. I can click on this design button, and it's going to give me even more options. For instance, what size is the text going to be, right? Is it going to use a particular format? Obviously, we want to stick with the heading 4. Do I want this to be left justified or right or centered? And then other things. So for instance, right now, it's using just regular text, the default text transform, but I can make them all caps or, various all lowercase, etc. So all that said, this is where we're making those changes. Again, font color. When we open up font color, it gives us usually around 8 or 9 colors that are the theme colors. And generally speaking, we want to stick with our theme. We want to remain consistent. So we don't want to put a purple in there because the rest of the page doesn't have purple unless there's a very specific reason to do that. So in this particular case, I might say, come over here and select color 5 or color green, or color black, which one is the one that I like the best. All right, we'll jump back over to the original, which was, I believe, that one. And then, again, you can experiment with other options in here. I will mention one more item, and that is margins. Sometimes we have margin issues. And in Asana, there are basically 2 kinds of margins. Or Asana, I said Asana. In Avada, there are 2 kinds of margins. Now, sometimes you don't have access to both kinds. In this particular case, the only margin I have is right here called margin. But there's another one that's also called padding. And you can see that showing up here over here with this box. We'll look at that in a moment. But sometimes we want to adjust the space or the margin between the element that we're looking at and the other elements on the page. In this particular case, perhaps I don't like that they're so far apart, and I can see they're 20 pixels at the top of this image and the bottom. So let me just change that to 0, and you see it just kind of jumped right up there. And I'm like, well, 0 maybe is a little bit too close. Maybe I'll say 10. I like 10 pretty good. The bottom was already set to 10. Change that to 20 if I want it to be further away. We'll keep that at 10. And of course, since I changed it with that element, I need to change it over here as well. So now I need to go ahead and find that title over here, jump here, and we're going to change that right here from top to 10. And then we're going to find this last one over here, the title. And again, we can jump into the title over here if we want to and change that to 10. So now there's consistency. It looks a little bit nicer, at least in my opinion, and I feel pretty good about that. Then you have elements like these button elements. So let's look at that for a moment, because again, when we go into some of these other elements that aren't just text driven, we have a lot of options. Of course, I have to say, well, where is it going to go? So I have to make sure that if it's a button, where is the button going to send me? Also, I have to decide if it's going to open a blank page or if it's going to stay in that window. Let me just kind of showcase that for you in a moment. I'm going to set this to blank page. We'll save that and kind of get a feel for what it looks like. We're going to jump over the front page and refresh the screen. And let's jump down there to, there it is. And I believe it was, which one was I making changes to? The Learn More button for, I think it was this first one. Let's just see what happens here. Right here. Okay, so it went to a new page. You see that? And usually if the page is already on your website, you don't want to go to a new page. So again, looking over here, the intents, of course, it just stays in the same page, and that's usually what we want. The only time we tell it to go to a new page is if the information is actually off of our website. Some other website, you're taking them to some other website than that. In that scenario, we would do that. Let's look at just one more thing here. This 2/5, this section here, and you'll notice that again we've got an image up here. You say, well, where in the world is that image? That new right there is an image right there. And so I can actually click on that and see there's the new, and that's where that's showing up. And I can see, again, settings. What's the alignment? The alignment is just text flow, which means it's off to the left, but what would it look like in the center? That obviously doesn't look very good. Right, I could say the left, or I could say text flow, which is basically the equivalent of what's the flow of the text, right? There's other things in here, all kinds of interesting things. We don't want to get into images editing right now. Title, text box, separator, button, right? Instantly, we jump over the button. We look at some of the changes that we can make here. Again, you can experiment with them, but right now it's set for the default type. But if I didn't want that button to be green, which is kind of the default, I can over here button style, hit custom, and there's a gradient ability, which usually I don't play around with too much with buttons. But for instance, I can come over here and say, hey, I want that to be a blue button. You'll notice the top half is blue and the bottom half is green. I can actually make changes to where's the gradient of that. There's all kinds of unique things that we can do with that. I'm not going to play with that. I'm just going to make both of them that blue, and there it is. Now I've just changed it to blue. With buttons as well, I'll mention that there's also, when you mouse over a button, sometimes the button will change color. So we jump over here and we'll see right here it changes to green. Right here, this changes to a darker green. And so that's sometimes hard for people to say, how do I change that? So when you're in the button design, you have to look for this round circle right here that says default state. So this is showing me the default state color. Whenever you see that circle, it means you can make changes. So I can click on that and say, how about the hover state instead? So now I can change that to be this blue right there. Now if we mouse over there and we look over and we mouse over it, we changes from green to blue. And maybe that's something we want to do that looks a little bit more interesting. The other thing that I'll mention again is sometimes when we select an entire column, there are changes that we want to make for the entire column, not just an element inside the column. All right, so let's talk about this 2/5 column right here, which actually overlaps the previous section. It's a unique design. So when we select a column, we also have the ability to select the pencil icon, and we can see more details here. Again, we can look at this and we can see, some various elements happening here. This is actually showing me some padding right here, so I can actually change the padding back and forth. I'm not going to do so manually. There's, again, some advanced items in here that we can look at, but in this particular one, I'm going to just jump over to the design and roll down, and we can see that there's a margin and there's a padding. This padding is set for 60. Let's change it. Sometimes when I'm trying to figure out, well, where's the padding? Actually, I believe it's probably this blue one right here. So sometimes I'll change it to something extravagant, like 160. Oh, that's where the padding is. Okay, so let me put it back to 60. Obviously, they think that 60 padding needs to be there for a reason, probably because if it's not there, then it doesn't really measure up and kind of line up very well with the rest of those. So they put it there for a reason. I'll probably leave it there. And then I can see this margin up here. The bottom margin is showing this purple right here. And again, if I want to, I can manually move it, but we want to keep that because it's going to make sure that the space between this box and these elements and this next one is lined up properly. But then I can see this negative 110, and this is a kind of an advanced feature, but that's allowing us to actually take this. So if we actually jump this over to 0, it's going to show us in the section that it's supposed to be in. But then we did this minus 110 to actually make it go negative value up to the top so that we have this cool overlap feature. So if you're using a theme that has some kind of overlap, that's how that's going to be adjusted. All right, let's jump over to the About page for a moment and go into the Edit here and look at some other items. Again, we can see another similar overlap right here. This person's head is actually overlapping right up here, and I can, again, select this image option right here, or I can try to find it right over here. Looks like intro and callback, and it's probably going to be this image right here for the second half of these two columns. And again, if I come in here to the column options, it's probably going to show me that it is, there it is, minus 170. That's why his head is actually jumping up above there. So another nice little tidbit there. All right, so let's look though at maybe, let's look at our team for a moment, and I'll just kind of highlight nested columns. So nested columns are a unique animal inside of Avada, and it took me a while to figure them out. Nested columns is when we have one column, like for instance, this column 1-to-1 right here, but then we want to create some unique look feel inside of it. So for instance, this particular column has got this green bar up here, and it's actually got some corners to it, and we can actually see that by just highlighting this and going over to the image settings and coming in here, and we can see that there is some padding. All right, that's blue right there. But we can even see, we should be able to see some border radius. That's where there's a little bit of a radius there to show you. If I make 100 radius and X out of there, you can see kind of the radius. It made that just kind of curvy. It's a little tiny bit curvy up there. Obviously, we don't want 100 radius, so we'll go ahead and put that back. But that again shows me what the radius is and what it looks like. So we'll pop that back right there. So because we already have some design, we got a shadow here and various things. They did something called nested columns, where it's columns inside of a column. And so in this particular case, I have to expand the nested columns to make changes. It's not always easy to make changes to text. So if you see I'm clicking right now and it's not letting me make changes to this lorem ipsum text in here, that's because I have to do it manually from within here. So I have to find that section right here, and I can go ahead and click on that text, and then there it is, and I can make changes to it. Okay, so keep in mind when you have nested columns and you make changes, it's a little bit more of a challenge. So Mike Hart, we'll just say instead of Mike Hart, we'll say Mike Smith. We've made that change. Now when I click on this X to basically navigate out of that section, you'll see that when I mouse over here, there's this blue X and blue a checkbox, and that's the place. Now I can click save, but sometimes that save does not appear. So it's usually, best practice to select that option to just save it, make sure that it's saved that Mike Smith, and then I can go ahead and save the page if I want to. While we're looking here in the nested column, we also see this thing called a checklist, and I can see right here it says locations covered, and then it's showing some various areas where Mike Smith works. Now, interestingly for me, I feel like the space between this title, which is right here, this text title, and the space between that and the places where he works, it feels too big to me. So I'm going to actually make changes to that. I'm going to click on this little pencil icon where it says locations covered and jump over to the design. And I'm going to say, well, let's look at the margin. Now, right now it's not showing any margin. So it's defaulting a margin. So I'm actually going to change the margin to 0px, and I feel a lot better. I feel like that actually looks nicer. The margin between those and the spacing between those is just much better. We'll go ahead and save that. But then we're going to go into the checklist, and this is another way to make changes to certain elements inside of Avada. I'm going to click on the pencil icon inside that checklist, and you'll see here San Diego, Los Angeles, Fresno. I can change this if I want to, to make that if I want textually. But then I can also go into these items and edit them individually. So this is where, for instance, for Fresno, maybe I don't want this icon to be just an arrow. Maybe I want it to be, I don't know, an apple, right? So I can make changes to that, and it'll change it to the apple. Now I remove the apple and I put back to the default. So this is where we can make more intense, or like, again, color changes. Fresno's and very important to me, or something like that. I can make changes inside there as well. And incidentally, let's say I wanted to add one more location that my friend Mike Smith covers. Maybe he doesn't cover just San Diego, Los Angeles, Fresno, and San Francisco. Maybe he also covers well, we already got San Diego. So let's go ahead and pick Ventura, right? Ventura, California. Looks like he's all in California for the most part. But what we can do is we can click Add List Item, which I actually don't recommend, because sometimes when you add a list item, if there's unique settings that you've set up, you'll lose it. So what I can do is, you see it just popped it here down at the bottom. I can go ahead and click on the delete item and delete that, but instead I can clone it. Cloning is actually a very, very helpful tool to help us be able to just keep all of the settings that we have created and utilize them over and over again. So San Francisco, I'm just going to clone that, and then I'm going to go into edit San Francisco, and I'm going to make that changes to Ventura, right? And so now we've got Ventura in there. I feel good about that. I'll click that finished button, and maybe I'll save my changes, and I'll be good to go. Now, I made that change right over here, locations covered, so that there is a little bit, less space between a margin between location covered and the list items. But you'll notice over here, John Smith, his still doesn't have that. Same thing with Angela. So now I'm going to have to actually go into each of those individually and remember to make those changes. So that was this one right here, and we're going to jump over here, and whoops, that was the first one. So I already did that one. We'll go into the nested. Now, while I do this, I'm just going to note here that 0px, again, you can play around this, right? Like 100, 20, 15, etc. You also could do percentages, but usually I don't recommend mess around with percentages too much. When you make a change, don't forget to also test it with the mobile version, because sometimes that changes how things appear and look. So we've made that change for this one. Let's make this final change for this one here. And then I'm actually going to show you how to use the duplicate feature to add another person. Let's say we hired another course instructor here, and we wanted to make changes to that. So let's first fix Angela's margin right here. The bottom is going to be 0px right there. Now, let's go ahead and finish and save. And let's say for some reason that we now, instead of having 3 instructors, and I guess I shouldn't call him John Smith. I can't remember what his name was. We got John Smith and Mike Smith. I guess they're brothers or something like that. But let's say that we're going to hire someone else. So in this scenario, again, what we could do, and this is something I haven't shown you yet, we could, find the place where we want to do it. So here's the column that we're playing around with. So we want to add underneath Angela another instructor. So I could just highlight this column 1-to-1 and click on the add element right here, add columns, and it's going to give me all this question, what kind of column do I want? Well, it was a 1-to-1 column, so I guess I should add a 1-to-1. The problem with that is you'll see here it's adding in a completely empty blank column, and now it's going to be a real pain to try to reproduce all of the programming that has already been popped into here and into here. So what we're going to do instead, this column 1-to-1, we're going to delete that. And instead, we're just going to take this column right here of Angela, and we're going to go ahead and duplicate it right here, clone the column. And now it's going to create a new one, and I can see exactly the same. And now it's super easy for me to come in here and make changes. I can come into the image and change that image to somebody else, and we'll talk about images later. I can go into the social links. There are no social links. I can go into the title, change that title to, Angela's sister, Betty, right? Betty Hart, and then I can change other things as well, right? So that was a quick and easy way for me to be able to add more content to this page without having it take a lot of my time and energy. Looking down to Our Promise, let's actually look at that for a moment, because I realized Our Promise also has a unique element. So let's jump over here and we'll see the first column and the second column has what we call toggles. So again, I'm going to look at the first column and let's say we've got some great toggles here. I can click on the pencil item and I can see my high rate of success, 0 accidents, etc. I can see them right here. Same thing if I want to add a new column right in here and make changes to it. I might say instead of we're never late, high standard of excellence, right? I should probably show high standard of excellence. While I do that, I can just go back out of there and there it is. I can actually click and drag these around. So maybe, I don't want high rate and high standard. That would be a little awkward. But I can come in here and now I can also see that it's open by default, which means that it's already open. I can say close by default or opened up. Usually we want the first one to be open by default. Sometimes I'll actually go into the other toggle and make the bottom one open by default as well, just so that it just adds a little bit more text and makes things line up a little bit more. Really what we're trying to do is we're trying to just let people know that when you navigate to this part of the page, that these are toggles that you can just click and you can see information, right? So open and close, and I can open them all, etc., etc. If I want to actually make some more unique changes to the entire group, I can also do that as well. So right here, when I clicked on this toggles and the pencil icon, I can select the different items individually, but I also can look at the settings inside of here. And let's say, what do I want the settings to be? Maybe I, want to use that apple, as the default icon, which I don't actually. Then I can make changes to what that's going to look like. We can also look at the design element and how many, all of various design elements. Do we want some padding? Do we want, some margin? Do we want some other things to look in a unique way? This is where we would make those changes as well. All right, so let's just jump over to pricing. I don't think I need to show you about pricing. It's very similar. It's just going to be another element that we would update if we wanted to. So let me just jump over here to pricing and let's just hourly. Okay, let's look at our pricing table. And again, it's just a different element, but it's very similar in look feel. It's going to create different options right here. And some of the text I can change right here, but some of the text I have to jump into. So standard, night, auto. Let's just jump into the auto. And I can make changes to this as well. Do I want it to stand out? No, I don't. What do I want that price to be? $35 an hour, maybe $37 an hour, and we can continue to update that as needed, right? Now I'm glad I popped over here because you'll notice that down here in the visual, there's a bunch of random text and it looks like basically code. And to be honest with you, it is code. This code right here is. That code is actually related to the button, and for whatever reason, whoever programmed or created this, they wanted that button. That's because we're using this pricing column. So when we want to, because we're using a particular pricing table, we're using this element, we actually have to do a little bit of coding. So if you're in a situation like this, it might be a little bit more advanced to be able to figure it out. If it's just a matter of changing where that button goes, that's easy. I can find that and just change it right in there. But a lot of times it can be a little overwhelming to see the rest of that. You want to be careful that you don't make changes too much to that text because you might actually break the functionality. For instance, I just come over to your Fusion button and I just clicked a space and F, and now it didn't break it that time. Oh. I'm not breaking it. Let's just try down here. There we go. So I broke it briefly, but Asana's getting smart on me. All that said, you want to be careful in that scenario, and usually I try to stay away from that as much as I can as well. All right, I think I've covered most of what I wanted to talk about when it came to navigation. Hopefully you found this meaningful and helpful, and it'll help you be able to keep your website up to date the best possible way. Thank you so much for watching. I'm sorry, just kind of close off by saying, don't forget, if you have questions, you can reach out to me at tlsites.com. If you would like help building a website for your organization, of course, I'm happy to do that for you as well. Have a great day. Bye now.